The podcast you're about to listen to may contain objectionable language, adult and/or immature content, mentions of Jesus Christ, and unironic readings of holy Christian scriptures. If any of this is likely to offend you in a manner that you find less than enjoyable, maybe don't listen.
Hi, I'm Pastor Bob Schaefer.
And I'm Pastor Eric Damon. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to CPTB, which doesn't stand for Curmudgeons Protecting Their Backyards.
But we are curmudgeons protecting our backyards.
We are so old. How did that happen?
Time.
And we have backyards. And they must be defended.
That's what we are. But that's not our podcast. What are we doing?
We are doing comedians with pastors talking Bible. And that is just exactly what it sounds like. Every other week, you and I have two fresh comedians here on the pod with us to talk about a passage from the Bible.
How do we pick the passages we're going to talk about? We just throw a dart at a Bible and find out how far it penetrates?
Yeah, but we don't use like the real darts. Those are dangerous. You know, we've got the ones with the plastic tips. Oh. Much safer that way. No, we use the Revised Common Lectionary, a cycle of readings for every single Sunday of the year for 3 straight years. Those are the readings that your church is going to have and my church is going to have. Lots of churches around the world. So it helps us to kind of have a standard that we can preach from.
So in other words, these are the passages we have to actually take a good look at, figure out how to preach, and we bring on two people who have absolutely zero expertise in anything except how to be funny about it. And we think this is a solid take that we're going to do.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Famous last words.
Look, it seems like it has always worked, and that means that we get this interesting take with preaching skills, information that'll help folks out like us, a good Bible study for folks who want to listen to that kind of thing, and laughs for everyone because we all need that. So we're still doing it.
Yeah, and this week we have with us Amanda Averill. Hello, Amanda.
Hello, hello.
And we have with us Zach Funk.
Hey, everybody.
And so really just to kind of get a background of where you, Amanda, do you consider yourself a Pittsburgh-located comic or an Ohio-located comic?
Fair. Very fair question. I am a Pittsburgh-based comedian. I started in Pittsburgh over a decade ago. Born and raised in Pittsburgh, in like just north of the city. So yeah, I'm a Yinzer unabashedly. I just have a weird, torrid love affair with the state of Ohio for some reason. I don't know what it is, but they keep pulling me back in. It's because they pay me money to go there. But no, Pittsburgh-based comedian for about a decade now. That's it.
Yeah.
There are no states that pay me to go to them one way or another.
I get lots of states that pay me to go there. It's very delightful. You should learn to get paid. It's nice.
Get paid to go places.
Yeah, get paid. Yeah, well, if you're good at something, never do it for free.
That's my problem.
That's got to be the problem. That's what it is. You got to be good at something.
And how much are we getting paid for today?
Hey man, I'm not good at Bible-y things, so I'm not getting paid at all. I am novice at best.
That's good because Eric and I are questionable too.
That's weird. And Zach Funk, who if you haven't checked it out, go find wherever you can find podcast things and find his album Brains Are Weird.
Yeah, thank you.
As you guys were talking about, you actually did some preparation, unlike most of our guests. I was listening to Brains Are Weird on the way here, and I will advise, do not listen to it on the free Spotify. It plays it to you entirely out of order, and you miss any momentum that Zach is building up as you hear one joke and then you backpedal to another joke. But
it's almost like Spotify's terrible for artists.
Yeah,
it's almost
like that. Almost like that. It's terrible for artists, and that you should buy it on Bandcamp.
They're giving you the Firefly treatment.
Yes. Oh, we're gonna get along really well. This is great. No, this and who
Clerks, the TV series.
Yeah.
Oh, you, sir, you do not know what you've started.
Yes. This is now pastors and comedians talking about nerdy culture.
Oh my gosh.
It often is.
Yeah. No, who'd have thought that, when you try to be a comedian that tells a story and builds a narrative, playing it on shuffle
would not work.
Yeah.
That is.
Spotify, apparently.
Yeah.
But we do not bring you on to talk about anything that you know anything about. We bring you on to talk about Scripture, and it's we found best for us to at least give a full disclosure of how we approach Scripture as pastors in the ELCA. So that's normally your take, Bob.
It is. So we are both pastors in the ELCA. That means that we subscribe to a confession that says that the Bible is the inspired source and norm of our proclamation and our preaching of Jesus Christ. It's a lot of fancy words to say that we treat the Bible with a lot of respect. We consider it to be true, not necessarily literal in every case, but there are lots of kinds of truth. The Bible is the thing that points us to Jesus and not the other way around.
I think that you guys should say that you like and subscribe to it, so that way you can maybe be like and subscribe to this podcast the same way we do the Bible.
Or
Okay?
smash that, whatever.
Smash that Bible.
Button. That's good.
Hit that. I don't want them hitting the smash button.
Whereas like the fundamentalists are out there on like the Bible's OnlyFans, just sending all their money to it.
That's an image I didn't need put in my head.
Well, I don't think it would be called OnlyFans, though. I think it. What would you
Only
call
scripts?
Only scripts? No, maybe. Oh, no, because right, so like it's a flock and sheep, so it's like only sheeple.
Ooh, that's a little too on the nose.
That is a little boop on the snoot there. That is a little bit too much.
I was thinking more of an also fans instead
Also-
of only
Yeah.
fans.
Also, fans.
fans as well.
But we don't expect any of the guests we bring on to hold to the same beliefs about Scripture. I invite guests because I think you're funny when I see you on shows and around.
He's wrong. We're not. It's okay.
You're funny enough that you get paid to go places for it.
That's true.
And so you're that once you're paid to travel for it, you're no longer allowed to play the humble card and deny it.
That's fair.
That's
Isn't it? I mean, you're a pastor telling me not to be humble. Ooh, spicy,
Spicy
choices.
I mean, we're supposed to boast in Christ is what Paul said. So you were given the gifts of humor. That I can bullshit a theological reason for almost anything
Oh, God.
if I so choose.
Oh no, that there was a friend of mine from high school. I grew up in Lancaster County. There's a lot of Amish and Mennonite and things like that. And she had a friend who grew up very strict Mennonite and converted to being Amish. And he loved playing like the flute or something like that. And when he converted to being Amish, he couldn't play flute anymore. But he argued with like the Amish elders that because his parents really liked it when he played flute, that playing flute was honoring his parents, and they gave him like a dispensation to be Amish and keep playing the flute.
There is so much in that story. First, we're unpacking the difference between Mennonites and Amish.
Oh,
which
yeah.
That's a delightful little dive into nuance.
And he's just being a highfalutin flautist. I can't even.
Yeah, like
But that's you have to make a good case for whatever you want to do, and if you're convincing enough, then did he play Jethro Tull music?
I never met the guy, so no, I don't.
I bet he was very popular because of all the fingering. How is not going to get away with any type of brass or woodwind instrument joke without that coming through. Okay, that was going to happen.
Last summer at band camp.
Well,
Yeah, right?
It helps that it wasn't an electric flute.
Oh,
I missed that.
I just, Mennonites and Amish and
Oh,
cars.
okay. I thought we were still on fingering, and I was wondering
Yeah.
how the electric flute was.
No. I mean,
No.
I imagine electric flute would like shake or vibrate.
no. They were more concerned about him playing with his skin flute than the actual
okay.
flute. The electric flute, that's generations beyond them.
So back to God.
Let's carve out this religion thing.
So we give our disclosure of how we approach Scripture. Don't expect either of you to have that, but it is beneficial for anybody who's going to follow our discussion to know where you come from. And so really, I just throw it out to both guests each time as to your general life experience with church, scripture, anything that comes to mind when you hear you're going to have to talk about Bible. And I'm looking at you, Zach, so I'll throw it to you first.
All right. So I generally identify as a agnostic humanist. I went to church as a kid. My grandmother on my dad's side of the family was Irish Catholic to the extent where, like, because my grandfather wasn't Irish Catholic, she wouldn't date him originally. And he had to, like, convince her, no, it's okay to date a Protestant. So my dad was raised Catholic. It was like you had to go to Catholic church till you were 18. After that, you could decide if you stuck with it or not. To the extent where, like, I've been told stories that my dad and my uncle would go to visit my grandparents, and they'd be like, "All right, we're gonna go." They'd like pack nice church clothes, and like, "All right, we're gonna go to like Saturday afternoon mass or something like that." And then they'd go play tennis, and they called it going to St. Skip's.
I was one of the teens that actually went to the Saturday night mass. No, it wasn't. I wasn't as dedicated to it as I have become in adult life. But that was where it was days before cell phones, and all of my friends I knew would be at Saturday night evening mass, so we could talk about what we were going to do that night. So that was kind of the getting on Facebook and figuring out what everyone's doing tonight, or whichever. Facebook is the old people thing, whatever the heck the kids today are using to connect. But
So,
my sister, though, she would not go, but because you had to explain to mom and dad that we went to church, she would walk in, grab a bulletin, and walk back out and leave. So she had a bulletin in her car to say I was there.
You got to have evidence, right?
So I went to a Lutheran church as a child. My mom would stay home. My grandmother, my mom's mom, was very religious and very unmedicated bipolar. And so those two things did not clash, mix well together. So mom has a very interesting relationship with the church in that sense. And going to church as a kid, it was always like, hey, Jesus said be good to people. And the most important thing is just be good to people for whatever reason you can find. Like I remember when they would do the whole like may the Lord be with you and also with you. My dad would be like may the force be with you and also with you. Like he would fill up like communion cups. Go in early to do that. He taught my Sunday school class because my Sunday school class. This was a predominantly like senior citizen church. So I was one of like 3 kids. So the Sunday school was like me and 2 other kids.
That is the norm for churches in the past several decades.
Yeah.
I mean, if you walk into one that has lots of multi-generational people, you are definitely in the anomaly.
Yeah. And then when I was 11, my dad passed from a car crash. And so even when I went to church as a kid, it never really clicked with me. Like I definitely believed in all the like care about people, be good stuff, but the idea of the holy, the spiritual, the supernatural, whatever you want to call it, just never really, like the idea of something from nothing. Like I remember being like 5 and being, well, where did God come from? Where did like the big existential question people get high and ask in college, I was asking as a child. And so then I had a lot of anger and resentment for a year or 2 after my dad's death.
Which I think is understandable.
Yeah, I'd say so.
That's a lot for an 11-year-old to process.
Yeah. And then I kind of, once I like learned the term agnostic, I thought, oh yeah, that's pretty much what it is for me. Because I don't like the people that are like militant atheists that are like, I know for sure there's nothing. Because I think it's arrogant to be like, I'm 100% positive. You know, if you really want to be somebody who's open to things, you know. I think Christ sounded like a great guy. I would describe myself as like a Kurt Vonnegut humanist. I like to share his stuff a lot where he talks about, you know, if what Christ said was good, does it matter whether he was God or not? Yeah.
I mean, Vonnegut's good. The problem with Vonnegut is he never edited. So there is a lot of good Vonnegut, and then there's a lot of you should have edited Vonnegut.
That's as someone who also doesn't really edit, I appreciate that.
Do you think, talking about editing, do you think Vonnegut would be like a Joe Rogan or a Pat McAfee today,
No.
and the fact that like he would just not ever have an inside thought anymore.
No,
He would just be on a podcast. It would be 4 hours
no,
long.
he'd be too busy smoking.
Do you think he wouldn't smoke on the podcast?
Yeah, he would, but at times. But
Come on now.
Yeah, so I growing up in Lancaster County, very conservative religious area. I was openly non-religious in high school, and I had classmates try to convert me multiple times. And I was like, hey, I appreciate your thought. This is coming from a good place. I get it. Like I had, it was senior year, AP Lit. Our teacher had this assignment where we had to start every class, one person, what was your turn of the rotation, he had to read something professionally written to the rest of the class. The idea is like get public speaking practice in and also like expose everyone to different styles of writing. And the 1 week, 3 out of the 5 days, my classmates read things that were pretty much just, I'm trying to convert people in the class. Like this wasn't even like, oh, I find this like writing beautiful. It was strictly just like proselytizing in class. The one that stuck out the most to me was this children's book about 3 trees involved in the life of Jesus. It's like there's these 3 trees in the forest.
I can see where that. I think I actually know of the book that you're talking about.
And like there are 3 trees in the forest, and they're good friends, and one gets cut down, and then they're sad. But then the 2 trees that are left learn that the tree that got cut down was used to make the manger, and it was just. And so when it was my turn to go the next week, I started off class by saying, I'm not here to offend anyone. If I do offend anyone, I apologize. That's not my intent. I think just if you're going to believe anything, it's important to have actually like decided this is what I believe versus this is the only thing I've ever been told, because there isn't a lot of open discussion in the area I grew up in. And then I read George Carlin's "There Is No God."
Which I'm sure went over wonderfully with that audience.
About half the class was like, "Oh, you're so going to hell." The other half of the class was like, "I'm going to convert you so bad."
So bad.
And then there was the teacher who was like, "Well, at least you didn't read the 7 words you can't say."
And in my head, the whole time going into this, I'm like, all right, like I'm not looking to like cause a scene or get in trouble. If like they try to like give me detention for this, like I'm ready to like argue free speech stuff. And the class ends. My teacher's like, "Hey Zach, can I talk to you?" In my head, I'm like a boxer, like on his way to the ring, like, "Yeah, come on, let's do this." And he says, "I think that was really brave, and I commend you." I was like, "Oh, I was not prepared for that."
I mean, just in not so much in person to person. I find person to person that's been my experience with someone who doesn't share the same convictions of the church. That is, in the social media world, you get a lot of it's not coming from an honest place. It's that some middle school edgelord thing of I still think in 2025, saying Sky Daddy instead of God is daring.
Yeah.
And you're like, really?
Grow up. I had that edgy 7th grade, but now it's like, no, it helps people be better, and it helps you not hurt others. Then that's all I really care about.
I've never heard God referred to as Sky Daddy.
Oh.
I've not, but now I think like, oh man, Elon Musk is going to make us call him that, isn't he?
No,
with the SpaceX and all the Skynet stuff he's going to end up doing. Like, he's going to be Sky Daddy.
Because like Musk, we don't even know if Musk has gotten past like solipsism. Musk might think he's the only real being in the world, I think.
Do you think he's an alien?
No.
He has an alien-looking face, right? Like, he doesn't look...
But he strikes me as the kind of person who, like, legitimately believes we live in a simulation and it doesn't matter, so just get as many points
Very
as
much
you can.
so, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but if anyone is going to make me believe in lizard people, it's him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I got real distracted by that Sky Daddy thing.
Yeah, that's a real thing.
Yeah, I've seen that a bunch of places.
I've
seen people say that at open mics. How have you not heard that? Yeah.
Oh, do you think I pay attention?
That's fair.
Jesus Christ, Zach, we've both been doing comedy for over a decade.
That's fair.
I shut
This phone
down.
says 4 minutes,
at an
make
open
light.
mic. Exactly.
So Amanda,
oh boy,
your just general background relationship with anything that you think of.
Okay, I know there's the warning at the beginning of the podcast for like content you might not want to hear. buckle up.
All right.
Because there might be content that could be not cool for some people to hear, and I apologize for that. But hey, man, it's my life, so suck it. Like, there's not a choice here. You're gonna have to get cool with hearing some not great things. So I was born and raised Catholic, big participants in the church growing up. Like, my mom taught the CCD there. We did have a rather large parish, because there was enough, like, there were 2 CCD teachers in the class. They did multiple days a week with CCD, like 30, 15 some kids in some of the classes, stuff like that. So we had like a large enough parish to do that. Like, we weren't even combining age groups and stuff like that. So it was a rather large group. And like, my biological father was involved in the church as well. Gross. There's so many ways I can define that person. I hate saying those words. Yeah. But like, we were very big participants in the church. Like, whenever they would do their like festivals each year, we participated. We ran the booths and did those things. My dad cooked at the fish fries. My sister and I would be like serving food to people. Like, we were very, very involved with the church. But I decided to leave the Catholic Church at age 10 because of trauma dump, if you guys don't want to listen, because the church would not recognize my parents' divorce. My parents got divorced because of me, because my dad is a you can look it up, he's a child molester. We can see that. So there was that. But the other main reason that I left the church was not just because they didn't recognize the validity of my parents' divorce, but whenever it came to court trials, my dad, because we were so involved with the church, brought in one of the priests from our parish as a character witness for himself in these trials where he was, So it was, it's a lot to talk about, but it's my history, and it is what it is, and it's not great, but it really helped me realize that, like, okay, if they can't recognize that this person is wrong, then I can't be involved in this. And to have those realizations at age 10 can be a lot for a person, especially whenever my grandmother is still a member at that parish. She still goes to church like weekly, I think, or like every other week at least. She's nearly 90 years old. She's like 87. So like, she still goes and participates in that. My sister had my nephew baptized at that church. They will not let me be a godparent because I made it through, up until like 5th grade. So like, you didn't past communion, but I did not go through confirmation, so they won't let me do that. So I'm not a godparent to either my niece or my nephew because none of the churches will like recognize me as that, like, stuff like that. So it's very, I don't like a lot of Catholicism's archaic ideals, obviously, because, the idea of like not recognizing a marriage, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's, or not recognizing a divorce whenever obviously the divorce was valid reasoning to say the very least. But I identify kind of as, I guess, an agnostic is the best way to put it. Zach and I identify pretty similarly on ideals. Like, we've been friends for a long time now, and we've talked religion and stuff like that. But pretty much identify as an agnostic. I am a person who just solely believes in the golden rule. Like, treat others as you want to be treated, right? I believe that a lot of the parables in most religious teachings, whether you're looking at like the Quran or the Bible, anything in between, a lot of the stories pretty similar, or the points that they're driving home are pretty similar with that stuff. I also kind of believe too that in the same way that Zach was mentioning, like being, agnostic over atheist, I don't think that there is a definity, and I think that it is naive for some person to say, I know for sure something doesn't exist. Like, you know what I mean? Like that. I think that, energy, we're all energy. Energy can be transmuted. So like, I feel like, because it's like energy's never like destroyed. So I very much feel like it would be naive for anyone to say, it's like, I know that this is the one thing.
Well,
Or I know that this one thing does not exist, conversely.
Like it's not an exact parallel, but I'll compare it to like do I believe in aliens, in life on other planets? Do I believe the guy who says like they tore up my cow and probed me? Not necessarily. But I think
that's the one guy I believe.
Yeah. but do I think that we live in such a vast universe that the idea that this is the best it gets out there, that's an incredibly disappointing universe.
Yeah, I know.
If we are the best it gets in all of space and time. So I think it's just it's arrogant to be like, no, I know for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's I have a very similar viewpoint with that kind of thing. So yeah. Yeah, that was dark. That was a little heavy for comedians on a podcast.
Trauma,
it's
Amanda.
Yeah.
Boom.
It was also true.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that it's also true. And I'm 40 years old. I can very much deal with it. I reconciled these things when I was in my teens, that like, hey, I don't, recognize, like, being part of that is not, that's a group I don't want to be part of.
Yep.
And I can always very easily identify groups that I do not want to be a part of and groups that I do. And the group that I do want to be a part of is just kind of like, hey man, be good to each other. Like, just be cool. And don't be a dick.
Yeah,
like that's pretty much it.
And to the trauma there's all sorts of trauma that religious institutions have caused. And in the way we were talking about, Elon Musk could totally view this as a game that has no real fallout. I find a lot of our colleagues, theologian types, forget the immediate the impact on actual human beings that theology has. I find, actually, not so much our colleagues. I find that pastors who have to actually live with the people that our theology affects tend to pay attention to that. But the pure theologian types tend to look at it as but this is what God said, and they forget that there's a human being who is hearing that the actual reparation that needs to happen now from damage doesn't fit into your window.
Exactly. Like, and I feel like that is also why, I feel like that is also why I relate to people who are not in Catholicism, and like how I can talk to like you and Ellen Lundy and like other people who are religious or pastors and things like that, because they see that gray area. Whereas like a priest, like that is seclusion at best, whenever it comes to like the real world issue of like how certain things apply in a daily life. But so it makes it difficult to get that relation, because it's operating in the area of black and white versus all of the gray that exists between.
Yeah, but you can find that in a lot of places though too. Like there was I dated a woman in high school whose parents were I don't know their exact denomination, but some kind of Protestant. And they were very concerned that I was dating their daughter because they found out I wasn't Christian. And they said she told me this because she knew I'd find it funny. That they thought like I was great. They loved me being around, but they were so afraid that if things worked out between their daughter and I, and we would got married, then I would eventually leave her alone in heaven. And and so that is the only
That's so dark.
Yeah, I know. So that is the only time in my life I've gotten to be the dangerous bad boy dating someone.
Also bragging about dating in high school. Zach.
Mothers, lock up your daughters. Zach Funk might make them sad when they're dead,
as opposed to when they're alive.
For that?
Yeah, really. But like, I remember so often, like after my dad's death, the amount of people that tried to use religion to comfort me, and it just made me angry.
Yeah.
That this is all part of God's plan, or like I remember it rained.
If you want to make a pastor mad, show up at a funeral and say one of two phrases: "This is all part of God's plan." if you're not the immediate person grieving, you're getting kicked in the nuts from me.
Yes, thank you.
And God needed another angel.
Yep,
You're getting a chokehold.
I got so much of that.
I hate that one.
And I remember it was raining when we buried my dad, and my grandmother, my mom's mom, told me that if it was raining at someone's funeral, that meant the angels were crying. And that was the first time I can remember thinking the word bullshit. Like not I thought someone was lying, but the specific word bullshit.
The funeral that like affected me the most was my grandfather's, like my maternal grandfather, because like he was essentially the guy who raised me. You know what I mean? Because we lived with my grandparents, my mother's parents, and so like we were around all the time. So whenever like that funeral hit for me, like it was just awful because he was really religious, and like the church that the ceremonies and stuff like that were in was not the same one that I grew up in, which thank God, if I can say that, because I think that would have been just too much for me as a person to like try and like get all of that stuff together in my brain. But like, that's the other thing though, is that I can believe in like, because I totally believe in ghosts. I've seen too much evidence for it to not believe in it. So like, that's where I'm just like, man, energy does transfer into things, and maybe it's just ghosty ghosts.
Well, and for me, it kind of comes down to like when we talk about like ghosts or even the idea of like predestination or fate. I like to say that I don't believe in fate, but I accept that it could be my fate to not believe in fate.
That is the most Zach Funk thing.
That is that's very Calvinist of you, and not in the Calvin and Hobbes sense.
But when it comes to
that's exactly what I thought was Calvin and Hobbes.
But when it comes to like ghosts and stuff, for example, like my mom and my sister have said they could feel my dad around at times. I have never had that experience.
Yeah,
I have a good friend from college who said she was very like sensitive to those kind of things and would like pause and be like, oh, I feel like this thing in here. And I knew her long enough that I knew like she wasn't, trying to like con us or anything. So I believe she truly felt those things. I've just never had those experiences. I used to work at a hardware store, and they were having me teach a guy how to use the paint making machines. So I told him to grab a paint chip off the wall, and he grabbed a shade of green and said, here's a nice flesh tone. It's like, all right, dude, either you're colorblind or like you blew your cover. And I accept that it's possible that I am, for lack of a better phrase, like spiritually colorblind. It might just be that, there are all these different wavelengths and things that, we all have different cones and rods, our brains work different ways. We all have, that kind of stuff that I think if someone's trying to like profit or exploit people with it, I'm inherently skeptical.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But,
like there's,
but in terms of the just like, oh, I can feel this person around sometimes, I will not question it. But it's just nothing I've ever experienced.
So I think that's actually really astute. The idea that our senses are tuned differently. To use a very completely different example, our church office has had an ongoing problem with mice that we've got traps in the ceiling, and they get caught in the trap, and they spend the last little moments of their mousy life there, and then they start to smell. And my secretary's sense of smell is much more highly attuned than mine. She will smell things before I have any idea that there's a mouse up there. And I've learned to trust that she's actually really, truly smelling something, that just because my senses are not tuned in a way that I can perceive that's a real thing, and I should pay attention to that. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that if that is true of the physical senses that we have, why would it not be true of our spiritual senses, of our intuition, that we might be tuned differently, and that there might be a blessing in that?
Yeah,
in our diversity.
I absolutely thought you were going to talk about mouse ghosts.
Mouse ghosts?
I was waiting for like sound traps. Like we can't hear it, but the mice can hear it.
Now I'm actually a little bit worried about how many little mouse ghosts we have created over the years.
And one of the things for me, and I really have had to reevaluate a lot of these like spiritual, ghost, whatever you want to call it, type stuff. So like I said, when I was 11, my dad died in a car crash. About 4 years ago, I found out it was not an accident though. It was actually a suicide by a car crash. And that had been kept secret for my sister and I for 25 years. Only my mom and my uncle knew, and they, per my dad's request, planned on never telling anyone. And then during the COVID shutdown, my sister did a Zoom session with a medium online. My sister's younger. She said she never questioned it to me, knowing my family has a lot of mental illness in it. I never had a reason to believe it was suicide, but that would have been, but I did at times think that would have been a logical explanation for what had caused the crash. And my sister said she felt compelled suddenly to ask, was it really an accident? And the medium said no. And then later my sister confronted my mom about it. Mom told her the truth. And so some people will say like that's definitely proof. Like I was doing a comedy show in LA once and I was telling this story. Or I'm like, or did someone get a 50-50 guess right? And now I have to figure out, like, not only do I have to reevaluate my own past, I have to reevaluate, are ghosts real or not? and because it was LA, 3 people in the crowd just yelled out, "Ghosts are real!"
Very LA.
And I mean, maybe also, ¿por qué no los dos? I mean, when you get the detailed instructions in the Old Testament for setting up the tabernacle and the high priest's garments and what the temple will look like, inside the high priest's breastplate are the Urim and the Thummim, I believe, and they're basically lot casting dice. And so you will see passages in Scripture where I think particularly like where the kings are inquiring of the priests, and it says, "And the Lord said yes," or "no." And it's just a very one word yes or no kind of an answer, and that is almost certainly reflective of that they had brought this question, and then the priest would cast the lots, and the answer would come up yes or no.
I love that there's a role to initiate.
I just
the
now
Dungeons and Dragonsness of this is delightful.
See, it's funny that you went there. My brain went to like God's Magic 8-Ball.
To be fair, they're both dice that can be very influential on outcomes.
And so I think in the same sense of my stance as an agnostic humanist, I think if you are someone who is naturally curious and wants to be able to learn and grow, it's important to, keep yourself open to new information and new things. And I still am inherently skeptical. But it definitely, it's a hell of a 50-50 guess.
Dude, we had to exorcise my sister's house from a ghost. And legit, it was insane. Like we went to the church and got holy water. We put salt in the corners. Things happened before that led us to believe that this place was haunted enough to do that. There's these 2 religious, I think they're called the Angel Ladies or something like that. And they knew my mom, and my mom was talking to them the one day, or one of them the one day about it. And they were like, "Oh no, she got a ghost in that house." and they told her everything to do. And it did cause lights to flicker and things to go off and stuff like that. And then also whenever I was even younger than that, we had photographic evidence of it in another house that we lived in, in our basement, just real weird looking stuff that shouldn't be there. So that ghosty, and I could always I don't know. I have weird, I would call it weird intuition things. Sometimes stuff just doesn't feel right or it feels off and then something happens. Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of a thing for me. Do I believe in ooh, there's a spooky Yuki behind me at all times? Or do I feel, my grandfather's or any other deceased, figures, spirits around me? Nah. But I know that there's been some weird stuff that can't be explained.
This is
for lack of a better transition.
Yes, the uncanniness of stuff that shouldn't be there but is. We've got the uncanniness of something that should be there but isn't.
And it's somebody who died and came back and didn't do it as a ghost. You guys actually showed up for us to talk about the Easter readings this Sunday. So
we did our research. I think
you are 2 guests that actually showed up prepared for something.
Before that, I would like to say today is actually the anniversary of my dad's death.
Oh.
And so it was leading into Easter. And I just want to say that as a grieving child, you get really tired about hearing about resurrection.
There it is.
The timing of that was like, oh, cool, people come back. My dad, no. Okay.
I mean, there,
Have you opened the coffin? Have you checked?
That almost happened once, but that's a whole different story.
I think you get in trouble if you actually dig down to look. But
Because there's a whole long, crazy story there.
well, we might get to it sometime. But right now, Bob's going to read us the Easter passage.
Yes, come back in 2 weeks and you might hear that one, folks. All right, so this is the gospel reading for the resurrection of our Lord, Easter Day, April 20th, 2025. This text, evidently expecting to find Jesus' corpse, some of the women among his followers go to the tomb with embalming spices. After a perplexing encounter with the empty tomb and angelic visitors, the women become the first to proclaim the amazing news of resurrection. This is Luke 24. On the first day of the week, at early dawn, the women came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood before them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you, while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the 3rd day rise again." And then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened.
So I will throw it out to your thoughts, but probably the most believable part of the gospel story is that the women came with a bunch of truth that they had experienced, and none of the men believed them.
Yeah, that's literally what I was thinking, Eric.
My first thought really was, as someone who, one of my best friends, his dad is a retired United Church of Christ minister, who also really likes Bob Marley. And in his office, he used to have a picture of like traditional white Jesus and like historically accurate Jesus, like side by side.
Okay.
A little kid saw his Bob Marley poster and mistook it for historically accurate Jesus and asked what was Jesus smoking when he saw the one calendar day. So I think that the argument that Jesus was white should probably be taken away because the women brought spices.
Yeah, that's very true.
Bada boom.
Yeah. They brought a
To be fair, that also means that those women were not white.
Yeah, I know. That's the further implication.
Yeah.
And so they're bringing spices because even though we had on a previous episode the reading of when Mary of Bethany prepares his feet for his death, and whether or not she actually knew that is up for. But because of the time of his crucifixion and because of Passover restrictions, they would not have been, and Sabbath restrictions, they would not have been able to do the preparation. So he has actually been laid in the tomb unprepared for death outside of what Mary of Bethany has done.
What a grief there too. One of the things that I think is true about funerary practices is that it is our way of showing our care for those we have lost, and that when we're deprived of the opportunity to do whatever the ritual things are, there's this sense of incompleteness and of grief prolonged.
Well, and that's always what I've felt about anything whenever it comes to, funeral services or anything like that. It's those are not for the dead. They're for the people who are still alive. Like whatever those funeral practices may be, like my mother's third husband there we go. So that way we can like skip ahead. Okay. Skip ahead in that story. He passed away during the pandemic in 2020, like May of 2020. So you couldn't have gatherings and things like that. But we still figured out a way to like have a gathering. Like we did like one day, everybody was masked. There was distancing. It was limited to like a very small number of people. Then there were people like who were outside allowed to like gather and stuff like that. And those, like the only reason we were still able to do those things was because it's not for like, I honestly don't think he would have cared. Do you know what I mean? Like this was very much clearly like for those who were grieving his loss. They're not for anything else. The same way that any type of preparation is for that.
In funeral planning, there's a unique balance with the family that has to be struck of, especially if they've been told specific wishes of the person who's passed, is that if it's important to you to honor their wishes, then this has value.
Yeah.
But also, by our theological understanding, they are in the care of our Lord right now and could care less what you do. They cared before that happened, and you need to do what's important for you. But there is that, if it's going to just stick in your craw the whole time that you didn't do what they requested, then that has value.
And he was younger than my mother. He was 54, I believe, whenever he passed away, or he was in his 50s. So like, it was very much unexpected because like, my mom and him had like almost like a decade age difference almost. Like they were years apart. Like my mom very much was not anticipating that. There was no poor health or anything of that nature. So my thought is like, were wishes even discussed? Probably not. Like
rather often not.
Yeah. In most cases, I don't feel like they are. And it's because, it's morose a lot of times for people to think about it that way. But I think that, that whole like going in the case of this passage, because I want to use the right term, I was going to say, in the case of this fairy tale, no. In the case of this story, no. The passage.
Story is a valid thing.
Story's valid because everything's a story.
Yeah, right? And story is important.
But I think that like in the case of this, it's like it almost, to me, it does speak about that closure. It's like they didn't get to do the thing that would have brought them closure, which is preparing the body, doing that stuff. Why the body was not there, that is where, like in my mind, where everybody kind of deviates as to why it wasn't there.
The closure thing reminds me of 2 points. One, this actually does somehow circle back to the almost digging up my dad thing. Yeah. Because one of the things we learned when we learned the truth by Dad was that in his suicide letter, he requested to be cremated. But no one, other than my mom and my uncle, no one knew that, because it was a secret, and a family friend convinced my mom to have my dad buried, and they did an open casket funeral. I have this distinct memory of the funeral home director telling me that if I touch my dad, since it's an open casket, and a little bit of stuff comes off, don't worry, it's just makeup. He's not melting. Which was
a well-intentioned thing
but as a relatively smart fifth grader,
almost certainly out of experience.
But as a relatively smart fifth grader, I was like, yeah, dude, I know bodies don't melt at room temperature.
I don't know, man. Have you watched enough Indiana Jones and seen people melt?
So once the truth came about my dad, there were some discussions about possibly having him dug up and cremated, because that was his wish. But when I looked into it, apparently, outside of just like how much money it costs to have done, you also have to, like, legally in Pennsylvania at least, put a notice in the newspaper, like, we intend to dig this person up within 30 days. If anyone has objections, like, you can file objections. It's like this huge public thing to get someone back up. And then the other thing I was thinking about in terms of closure is one of my best friends who's like family to me. A couple of years ago, her husband died in a car crash. And he was a Green Beret combat medic. So while they did his regular funeral here in Pittsburgh relatively quickly, he's actually buried in Arlington, and they weren't able to do that ceremony for almost 3 months. So she had to do like 2 funerals 3 months apart. And the military funeral was, this giant ceremony that it was just, even then the idea of having to have those like, okay, this should be wrapped up now, experienced twice and separated like that, I think is such a harrowing thing to go through.
I was thinking of military families actually as along with COVID, because that was a time where our normal things that we would do for our dead as a way of bidding them farewell and showing our love to them were really disrupted. And now think about the women coming to the tomb here, that they've already, because of a holiday, had what they would normally do to show their love for Jesus disrupted. They haven't been able to do it. And they come to the tomb and they find his body is missing. And so even this thing that they had hoped to do for him a few days too late, now their initial wallop of grief is that we will never be able to do this for him because he's been taken.
Yeah. And like that, and to think about that too, that it is also like occurring during that holiday. Do you think that there could have been somebody who was so miffed by the whole situation that they were the one to then remove that body?
That's certainly the fear, right?
Because that would be my immediate thought, was that, like, we pause the idea of supernatural and we go into the logistical of like
grave robbing.
Yeah, it's grave robbing or this, obviously animals a possibility, but not with moving that big stone anyway. But the idea of like grave robbing or somebody thinking that it is like a sacrilege thing because this is occurring during this other holy time when it shouldn't be happening.
We're obviously concerned with that speculation as they include lots of details about, and centurions were placed at guard and a stone. I mean, they include as many details as they can to try and say, hey, I know what you're thinking. And that's not what happened.
And one of those is right here in the text. And the church fathers, the theologians and pastors who were writing about this stuff in the early years of the church, some of them not too long after things happened, they really hit on this detail about the linen cloths lying by themselves. And they said, look, nobody who is stealing a body is going to take the time in the tomb to take the clothes off, and in one of the Gospels, even they're folded up and set aside. If you are going to steal the body of Jesus, you're going to take the body of Jesus with the clothes on. You're not going to say, I want him naked first and leave the clothes behind.
I mean, if this was an episode of Columbo, they would have definitely tried to cover it up like that. But we have seen who did it in the first scene.
Well, and one of the church fathers, I forget who, I was reading this, had pointed out that after the body has been treated in any way for burial with what was it, myrrh? The myrrh was the perfume that was used. That, although this is kind of gross, the cloths are stuck pretty well onto the body.
Yeah.
And to try to take those off of the body is not a small task. So there again, you're probably, even if for some reason you do want to separate the body from the clothes, you're probably not going to try to do that in the tomb there while you might get caught. So that was one of those details. Whether it is persuasive to you or not is a very fair question. But that detail is in there and is one of those things that it has this feel of veracity.
Yeah, I don't know. My brain just went to this thing of like, the conspiracy theorist angle of it of. Like, well, if you look at the Zapruder film on on Golgotha, there was an actual other person there.
They're definitely, by the time the gospel writers were writing these, because this is, the earliest one is, if you trust the earliest dating, you're looking at 30 to 50 years after this has happened, and then we're far later than that by the time the rest are being written. Conspiracies have definitely arisen amongst the people who don't believe the message that is being preached about Christ. So they need to put in some little details to try and if you're not a believer, those details are exactly like the YouTube conspiracy theorist going, and look, there's the dot. I told you it's there.
Yeah.
Jet fuel can't melt giant stones.
That is the exact thought I was thinking.
But when you brought up the directive of resurrection being brought up around a actual death. So Jesus is raised. What about the others? And for me, the most difficult thing every year about preaching Easter is taking it out of the sweet by and by that, well, you'll all be raised again in heaven, and trying to make it real in our lives of when the worst has happened. Where is the hope still lying? I forget that the person who, I'll paraphrase the quote, but a gospel that cannot be preached in Auschwitz is not the true gospel. I forget.
I'm blanking on it, but I know the quote. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it Weissel or Peterson? I don't know who, but but generally we have to take this and not preach it in a way that it only counts if everything has gone perfect and you died peacefully and now they're in heaven. Where can we, on Easter morning, it is important to me to preach a message that can look out to the hurting person and say, here's the worst has happened. Our hope is not that we'll avoid the worst. Our hope is that the worst will happen. And then there's hope. And I don't know. That's a difficult thing to put into concrete stories if you're not invested in this story.
And it is something that like I find kind of beautiful. Like I have friends that are deeply devout, and there are times like that. It seems like really comforting to be able to believe that is there. It's just something that I've just never connected with.
Mm-hmm. So I am not in the habit of quoting Chuck Colson, but
I'm not in the habit of knowing who Chuck Colson is.
Blessed are you. But broken clocks twice a day and all that. Right. So here is a quote that I recently came across on Facebook, and I think that this does add some truth when you think about the conspiracy theories that are certainly going to arise from the whatever happened on Easter. Colson says, "I know that the resurrection is a fact, and Watergate proved it to me. How? Because 12 men testified they had seen Jesus raised from the dead, and then they proclaimed that truth for 40 years, never once denying it. Everyone was beaten, tortured, stoned, and put in prison. They would not have endured that if it weren't true. Watergate embroiled 12 of the most powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep alive for 3 weeks. You're telling me 12 apostles could keep alive for 40 years? Absolutely impossible." And I mean, Chuck Colson was part of the Nixon administration. He was close to all of this. So, like I said, not a fan, but I feel like that line of thought is interesting to me, because I think it is true that it is one of the things with conspiracy theories that people who are skeptics like to put out there is how hard it is to have even one or two people keep a secret for any amount of time and keep the story straight and stick to it, especially when there's pressure. And then you have more people involved and the thing gets more elaborate. And conspiracies are, to have a real conspiracy that actually exists and works and you get away with it is really hard.
I want to agree with that, but there's also the idea of, well, how many times did they have to tell this story? And then also, how many times has this story been rewritten and things like that to form it the way that it is currently formed, and the way that like we've heard it today, the way that it has been told, since, like you said, documented like 50 years out from it.
Well, look at you being a form critic.
I'm just saying.
There's like a whole branch of biblical studies, form criticism, that you are advocating for right now.
And that was always one of the things that I would bring up when I was a kid. It was like, well, you're reading a translation of a translation.
It's telephone.
They're like, there's only one Bible. I read the King James version. It's like, so it's a version.
Yeah.
I'm just one of those stuck on just how quaint Watergate seems right now.
Oh my God.
Zach, that hurts. That hurts.
I don't know. We have people that agree that January 6th was the showing of love.
Oh man. No, they were just all hanging
and
out.
The
They were all
worst
just hanging
can
out at the same
happen,
place.
and hope still rises. That cling to that.
Oh Jesus.
Right. Oh, Jesus.
Oh Jesus.
As we approach time ending on that lovely sentiment of our downfall, I think, we've the field of like actually making a case for that this is literal. The gospel resurrection is one of the things that our denomination does take as literal. But the field for making a case that it's historical happened to people who don't believe is called apologetics. And I think we have fallen into a bit of that in a way that I wouldn't preach on Easter morning, but in attempts to kind of see something. I think we began with a lot of trauma. And I think it is important for anyone preparing to preach Easter to not put Good Friday out of the picture just because Jesus has risen. Easter shows hope amid Good Friday. It doesn't make Good Friday go away. There's
if anything, the trauma of Good Friday is very present in this reading.
Yeah, and perhaps that is just a solid enough sentiment to end our discussion of the Easter reading on is remember Good Friday. Good Friday is where the victory was won. Easter is where we just found out that it happened. And
it's on tape delay.
Yeah. So this is coming out, and actually we're recording closer than we normally do to. This episode will be coming out on April 13th. If either of you have anything you'd like to plug that's coming up around then.
Oh man!
If not, just put where they can find you.
What funny stuff are you doing during Holy Week?
I was going to say the funny things that I'm doing during Holy Week. I'll just say go to my website amandaaverill.com or follow me on Instagram at AmandaAverill, Averell, and that's where you can find any and everything that I'm doing. I've got a lot of stuff going on, amping up for some stuff in Pittsburgh, outside of Pittsburgh. I'm going to Amsterdam, hopefully London, Paris, and Brussels as well for some shows, doing some stuff up in New York, and I will be in Louisville in July. So I'm everywhere. Yeah. I'm everywhere, just like the Lord and His Spirit.
Except the Lord didn't get paid for it.
The Father, the Son, and Amanda Averill.
If there ever was a title for this episode.
I see, so I'm just not even here then.
We had your father and son story at the beginning.
That's true. Yeah, this is pretty my father and son, my father-centric at times.
And so definitely check out Brains Are Weird. What else can they?
So this September, I am recording a second album on Saturday, September 6th at the Funhouse at Mr. Small's in Millvale in Pittsburgh. Tickets will be $20. The album is called Farce. It comes from a Marx quote because a way to really appeal my audience by quoting Marx in my title.
I mean, you're picking your audience.
Yeah.
Is what you're doing.
And if you think learning the truth about my dad today was interesting, find how I turned that into stand-up comedy by either coming to or eventually listening to Farce.
See, the answer's trauma.
But
Well, thank you to anybody out there who is still listening. If you were offended, we're sorry.
Yeah, but you totally listened to the whole thing. That's on you. It's your fault.
You dum-dum. Okay, dummy, you're still here. So do us a favor. Be sure to subscribe to CPTP any place you get your podcasts. Share it with your family, your friends, your pastors, anyone you think is going to enjoy it.
Share it with your enemies. It's a good thing to do to them.
They deserve it. We will be back in 2 weeks.
Until then, may the Holy Spirit do her thing in your life.